Steve Bannon and Elon Musk apparently have beef, and this rift seems to have appeared right after the H1B visas dispute between Elon Musk and the sort of general MAGA audience. Elon Musk was on Twitter sort of going to war with the more racist part of the MAGA base, which, to be clear, Elon Musk very deliberately made a space for and an environment for on X. And then he finds himself, going to war against these accounts, faceless accounts, Nazi accounts, weirdo accounts, about the fact that Elon likes H1B visas, which essentially allow him to employ engineers from places like India for low cost. So he gets some of the best engineering candidates in the world for cheap labor. And this is attached to obviously these visa recipients' ability to be in the United States. So it's an enormous amount of leverage that the employer has over the recipients of the H1B visas. And so that's why Elon Musk likes them, because it's the type of labor that he likes, that he doesn't have to pay that much for and has complete control over. And so not only did this set him against the racist portion of the MAGA base, which essentially just feels that we shouldn't be bringing over any brown employees, workers, anything from any countries, that we should do away with all of that and only be hiring white people. And so a lot of them were getting mad at Elon Musk in saying that he should only be hiring white people, essentially, at his companies. So that's the contention between them. But then you do have, I think, a broader schism in MAGA world because of Steve Bannon. And that's what's interesting to me about this. And Steve Bannon has done a flurry of interviews, or maybe it was just one, but he said a bunch of really interesting, really hilarious things about Elon Musk. Steve Bannon, as much of an evil, rotten sack of shit as he is, he really does have his finger on the pulse sometimes. And he said something about how, why are we letting South Africans, who are some of the most racist people in the world, have any say in American politics, which is true. That sounds like something that I might say. And that statement's a little confusing because I don't understand in what way is Elon Musk or South Africans racist that is not exactly what MAGA wants and likes. Isn't that the reason that Elon Musk has been so welcomed into the MAGA movement in the first place? Doesn't it seem rather obvious that his white South Africanness is what has drawn him to MAGA politics in the first place? But aside from that, Steve Bannon also said that Elon's single goal is to be a trillionaire and that's it, and saying things like, I'll do whatever I can to keep him away from the White House. So this is interesting. Steve Bannon has a propensity to do tough talk like this. He's very much the spearhead voice of the militant wing of the MAGA movement. And so that is where this becomes interesting to me, because in Steve Bannon and Elon Musk, you do have two very important figures in the MAGA movement, and they occupy very different spaces, right? Elon Musk is essentially able to be in Trump's ear all the time. He's around him too much. It seems like some of the reporting is saying that Trump, it seems obvious to anybody watching that Trump would get sick of this guy being around, just based on everything that we know about Trump. And that seems to be the case. While Steve Bannon was formerly in the administration, in Trump's first administration, he was one of his first cabinet members. He was originally appointed. And then Steve Bannon was fired from the administration, and in humiliating fashion, as tends to be the case with Trump, where he insults him. And I don't remember, there was some spat at the time. Steve Bannon was essentially getting into it with a bunch of different Trump cabinet members, because at the time Steve Bannon was kind of doing the same thing. He was saying Steve Bannon wanted a higher tax rate. He wanted, I don't remember too many of the policies that he was pushing for. I definitely want to be careful about championing Steve Bannon as some kind of like populist, because he's not. But the truth is that he sits a lot closer to that in terms of his motivations than certainly somebody like Elon Musk or really anybody else who's going to find themselves in a Trump administration. Steve Bannon has been pretty consistent in his hatred of like globalism of, U.S. companies, outsourcing work to different countries, outsourcing manufacturing to different countries. Like I said, he was at least he purported to be in favor of a higher tax rate when he first got into the Trump administration. So in some ways, Bannon sees Trump as a way to get some of these policies a little bit more relevant. But the problem is it never happens. Trump obviously cut taxes for the wealthy enormously in his first term. He's going to do the same thing again in his second term. And so this is where, to me, the dynamic between Steve and Elon is really interesting. And I think Steve Bannon, the reason he's doing this media approach, which he does every time he does this in a very calculated way. Steve Bannon purposely does interviews to get quotes like this out into the world. And so he is going after Elon because he does not want the Trump administration to fully serve the wealthy if it's not going to result in the type of racist policies that Steve Bannon likes. I don't think Steve Bannon cares if the Trump administration, serves Elon and the other richest people in the world, Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg. Steve Bannon has never really taken issue with people like that, and he's never taken issue with the fact that Trump collaborates and capitulates to those people always. And so only because of this H1B visa thing has Elon's stance on anything become an issue with Steve Bannon. And only then is it a problem that Elon is a part of the MAGA movement that Steve Bannon is taking issue with. And so what I'm wondering is, how far does the wedge have to be driven between Steve Bannon and the rest of Trump world? Because Trump is going to go with these plutocrats and technocrats. He's already doing it. That's what he's always done. And this is really what happened the last time Steve Bannon was in a Trump administration is, he was doing this rah-rah thing, and it essentially annoyed Trump and the people around Trump enough to where they got him out of there. And even in that, Trump called him like sloppy Steve Bannon and did the whole insult thing that he was doing and fired him. And then Steve Bannon, in response, said that he was always going to be a fighter for Trump. He would always be loyal to Trump from the inside or the outside. So just astronomical levels of bootlicking, but it also shows how much of the Kool-Aid he's really drank, how indoctrinated he is into feeling that Trump is the political leader. And so I do feel like that's less attached to any policy and more attached to the fact that Trump is an effective weapon against the things that people like Steve Bannon tend to hate, like civil rights, expanded rights for women, expanded rights for minorities, etc. Regardless of the things here and there that might happen that people don't like about Trump, they like that Trump is an effective attack dog against those institutions. And so it doesn't seem like there's a point where Steve Bannon would lose his loyalty to Trump, except for the fact that now he's making it known that he hates Elon and he wants him out. That's just a bold thing to say. I'll make sure that he's out before the administration starts. So, the clock's ticking, and that's pretty interesting to me. I don't know about you guys, but I want to see Steve Bannon and Elon fight. And that's good for us. It's good for us either way. But I would say that we may be better off with the Trump administration that leans in the direction of Elon Musk versus a Trump administration that leans in the direction of the Steve Bannons and the Oath Keepers, etc. If I had to pick one, I would have him going towards the plutocrats because, first of all, he's going to do that anyway. And we might be able to avoid some of the fascist street violence that people like Steve Bannon have made it their mission to foment. And even if we could see some of that anger and ire pointed towards the Trump administration instead of pointed towards everybody else, but pointed towards Trump because of Trump's siding with these plutocrats and technocrats. If Steve Bannon is going to make it his position that he is against that portion of the MAGA coalition, well, guess what? That's the portion that's in control. And so if Steve Bannon wants to position himself against that, he's going to lose that fight. And it just makes me wonder how much of a fracturing that would actually cause. Because that's what we want. We want the Bannon portion of the MAGA movement to be alienated. We want all of those militias and all of these radicalized, domestic terrorists, white supremacist terrorists. We want them to feel like they don't have a political home and like there is no organizing structure that serves their needs. And so as long as they're attached to Trump, they're going to have that structure. But if they're not, it's going to fall apart. Because as this is sort of getting at, a lot of these people don't necessarily believe the same things. They don't have the same, actual political motivations. And this is what a political coalition is. Trump is the whole thing that ties it together. That's why Steve Bannon is so loyal to Trump, because he knows that Trump ties together all these different portions of angry white people and ignorant Americans into an extremely powerful weapon against civil rights and social progress. And so for that coalition to be withered away and whittled away at, and for those parts of the Trump movement to feel less powerful and less like they have a say, that's good. And that's exactly the type of wedge that needs to be driven into the Trump movement. Not to mention the fact that Elon has built Twitter or X out to essentially be an organizing vehicle for these very same militant forces. Everything from that to random 14-year-olds who want to spread propaganda on the internet. That's what Elon Musk has turned X into. So it's an important organizing vehicle for the same groups that Steve Bannon has an enormous influence over. A wedge between those two guys in particular could lead to some very interesting hurdles in the organizing process of the more militant wing of the MAGA movement. So I will say that I don't think Steve Bannon is all that manipulatable. I mean, maybe, but the ways of doing that are not exactly clear to me. I mean, Steve Bannon's very consistent. He's a smart guy. He's a very effective propagandist. And he does everything that he's doing very deliberately. So I think Elon, though, is a much more manipulatable person. I mean, Elon probably reads every single thing that's tweeted at him on Twitter. And it already worked to begin to drive a wedge between him and Trump and the rest of the MAGA movement, to just poke and prod him about these H1B visas. That's all it took for him to crash out about MAGA and then spin it into this whole weird thing about his fake account, Adrian Dittman, and everybody gets distracted by that. I mean, it caused a whole kerfuffle just because people were attacking Elon personally. And that, I think, is the type of energy that's really going to cause huge fractures in the Trump movement, is people going after Elon and also trying to convince Elon that Bannon is going after him and that something needs to be done about Bannon. I think if Elon becomes convinced of that, then that's what will happen. And whether that will lead to a broader fractioning of the militant MAGA movement, I don't know, because it's possible that Steve Bannon would remain loyal to the Trump movement. Even he would capitulate all of this bluster just to remain a sort of part of the conversation. That's probably the most likely. But all of these guys are egotistical. All of these guys are in the Trump movement in the first place because they're egotistical and they want to be the saviors of the Western world. And so it seems to me that Bannon and Elon are the two that are making themselves the most visible in terms of where there are weak spots in this coalition. And so, I think pushing Elon into feeling like he cannot coexist in a MAGA movement that has Steve Bannon and the likes of Steve Bannon in it can only lead to good things, because it's either going to push Elon out of the MAGA movement, which in itself is a good thing, or it's going to alienate the Steve Bannons and the outside radical right-wing terrorists that are able to provide a lot of the brute force or the fear of brute force that Trump needs in order to get some of the scarier things that he wants to do done. And so, yeah, I think that is where the most meaningful wedge exists in the MAGA movement. And I don't know if it can be effectively exploited, but if it can, it is through the ego of Elon Musk.